Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. HISD, 1, 2, 3.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. We are going to call a meeting to order. It's a work session for the trustees of Harlandale ISD. But before I call the meeting to order, I just want to thank everybody who had everything to do with our Frontier Bowl this weekend. It was a very successful event. I want to thank the groundskeepers, the athletic department, communications, and everybody in between. Everybody in this district had something to do to make that Frontier Bowl successful. And I am truly, truly grateful, Mr. Soto, to you and to your staff for making it such an amazing and fun evening. Thank you, everybody, for doing that. So I am now calling the meeting to order. It is 6:15. I am Norma Cavazos, the school board president, and I will do roll call of the members that are present here. Ms. Carrillo?
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Carrillo. Ms. Limon?
Here.
Mr. Mancha? Mr. Moreno? Mr. Luna?
Present.
Ms. Ortiz?
Here.
And myself, we do have a quorum. Mr. Superintendent, would you let us know who is here?
Yes, Madam Chair, Board of Trustees, HISD family. This evening, we have our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance, Mr. Richard Hernandez.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Operations, Dr. Hinojosa.
Here.
We have our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Ms. Casey.
Here.
We have our Executive Director of Human Resources, Dr. Salinas.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We also have Dr. Judy Castleberry with us. Good evening, Dr. Castleberry.
Good evening. Thank you.
Ms. Patty, agenda item 2, public comment. Did anybody sign up for public comment? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, the board will hear demographics, 10-year student population projection. Mr. Soto?
Yes, Madam Chair, Board of Trustees. Just for us to be clear, and since we've been doing a demographer study for the census on redistricting the board alignments, this one is on our student population. So this is another demographer, and this is going to go over the demographic study of our student population and what it would look like in 10 years. And so at this time, I'd like to introduce Christian Parr, our demographer.
All right. Yes, I am Kristen Parr with Davis Demographics. We worked with Harlandale ISD for 2 years. We're in our 3rd year now. So I'm going to kind of go over the work we have done, and everything is going to be based on last year's study that we did mostly in the fall of 2021, based on those numbers to create the 10-year forecast. We are currently in the process of like updating those numbers as well. So just keep that in mind if you're like, we're already in 2022, why are we talking about this? But this is based on your fall 2021-22 student count. So just got to figure out how the clicker works. Okay. All right, perfect. So some of what we did, we geocoded all of the. Oh, no problem.
Ms. Barr, give me 1 second, please. You can find the PowerPoint at the bottom of your computer screen. Yes, Thank you, Mr. Soto. Thank you,
All
ma'am.
right, no problem.
Go ahead.
All right, great. So the first step is like geocoding all of your student data going back, we go back 3 years prior and the current year. We also have 2017 data because we worked with you before. When I say geocoding, that is looking at your student addresses and putting a point on where they live, because all of our forecasts are based on where your resident students are. Because for school planning, it's best to know like what neighborhood you're serving, and then policy changes can affect like your transfers and things like that. We calculated student mobility, which is like a cohort analysis of how the students travel from grade level to grade level year to year. We did student yield factors on some of the new housing to get an idea of how many students to expect from the new development coming into your district. Research the residential development that is occurring. We created attendance matrices to identify student transfers, basically that show we have this many students living in this zone, but they are attending these schools, to show where you have students opting out of their home school or deciding to transfer somewhere else or being recruited to other schools. And then we created the student forecast from this current school year all the way through 2031. So I'm going to kind of go over an overview of what we found, then I'll get more into the methodology of how we found it and some more specifics by your grade configurations. So you've been kind of on a trend of decline that really kicked up in the last few years. So as of right now, it's showing a net decrease of more than 3,100 students over the next 10 years. There was a very significant decrease of 19% between 2018 and 2021. So that loss, a lot of what happened in 2020, we're hoping was just due to COVID. The bounce back from that was not very high. So when I say not high, you didn't really fully regain, but you also did not like go into growth. It was just not so much of a decrease. But with that drastic drop within those years, as that matriculates through, that's what's kind of feeding into that really large number as we get down 10 years down the road. Oh, well, sorry. They kind of all popped up, but I'll just read through them. So like I said, the pre-K and kindergarten classes saw the biggest decrease with the pandemic, which is what we've kind of seen everywhere. Didn't really pick up in 2021. Again, we'll be looking at this again this year to see what has happened now that we're a little further in. In some cases, I've seen districts start to bring in more kids at the lower level. Others, it's just kind of like, this is the new normal for a multitude of reasons. Your middle school population is forecasted to decrease by 700 students over the next 5 years. Again, when I'm saying a population, I'm talking about students that attend a Harlandale ISD school. That's your student population. These are students that live in your district and enroll at a school. As these smaller elementary classes are matriculating through, it's really affecting the students in grades 6 to 8. It's going to be a decrease of more than 46% by 2031. And the high school population is expected to decrease by nearly 1,200 students by 2031. Again, this is just that kind of boulder effect of that small class size matriculating on through. And so you do have low birth rates that are causing, I mean, the declining market share, we'll get into that later. It's not much. It's not like you have a huge amount of charter school competition taking students away. It's mostly the low birth rates and the lack of residential development. You do have some stuff coming online, which will help, but it's not a whole lot. You're mostly a built out district. So not babies being born equates to smaller kindergarten classes and just escalates as we go across the years. And then if we want to look more specifically at the attendance areas, we've got all of the elementary schools are showing decline in resident students. Schools is actually expected to see the largest decrease with a net change of more than 130 students over the next 10 years. It does have both of the developments, so we can hope that that will maybe not be so much, even though I have considered it in these forecasts, but we could see that maybe these specific communities attract more kids than originally expected, or as people move in and maybe have babies after they've already moved in, that could help with some of that decline. And there's also quite a bit of development that's not necessarily in your boundaries, but could give you the opportunity to recruit from some of these neighborhoods that are just around the border. So Collier, Gillette, Stonewall Flounders, they're all expected to decrease by more than 100 students by 2031. So that's almost like a class size across all grade levels. All 4 middle schools will experience decline with Leal. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's going to be about 335 students over the next 10 years, which is a pretty significant number to consider just based on the elementary schools feeding it, having big impact. Of course, both high schools will experience the largest decreases kind of later on as that impact from the last 2 years of loss continues on through, as well as the declining birth rates. So you're going to see how it will shift and that decrease becomes more rapid later on for high school level. So for like Harlandale High School, it's showing more than 600 students lost over 10 years, and McCollum with 560. So for our forecast, sorry for all the like grim news, but I'll kind of go over how we can figure it out, these numbers. It all starts with your student data, your current and historical students. We map all of that out. We look at the historical birth data. We look at your parcel data from the county to see the homes and where students live, birth factors from the state to see how many babies are being born. It's all based on the zip code of where the mother lives. How students move within your district and established housing, that's the mobility factors, and then what to expect from new development, all gets compiled in to create these forecasts. So one of the biggest challenges when we first started working with you guys was getting your attendance zones digitized. You had some PDF maps that we were able to get our hands on that were old, difficult to read, and just trying to match it up with what was in your system. So we did digitize your boundaries into the elementary zones. Some of them look kind of weird just because it's mostly streets are assigned, where it's like this side of the street, you know, or both sides of this street will go to this school. So there's some slivers like up in the Adams zone where it's like this street is going to this school and there might be some little side houses, but that was a big undertaking, but that is all now cleaned up, even though some areas look wonky, but we were able to really see your transfers by getting those boundaries drawn correctly and then geocoding the students. So on the right, that's the density map. As you can see, like in the southeast portion of your district, that's like where the airport is. So you don't have students there. You've got a lot of density up in the northwest, northeast, the Schultz zone where you do have development coming in, but right now it's not super dense area. So for the birth factors, I kind of put in a whole chart. What we're looking at when we go into look at your kindergarten classes, we're going to assume whatever child is born in this particular year, 5 years later, they will start kindergarten. It's not exact because of the timing of, you know, being 5 before September, but that trend kind of allows us to look at how things have changed year to year and use that trend to look at whatever your kindergarten classes in 2021, then how did births change between 2016 and 2017? So there was a decrease of like 90, like a decrease by almost 4%, 3.5%. So that birth factor is 0.966. So it's saying because there were fewer births, we're going to expect your kindergarten class to be smaller by this amount. And that rolls through. Since we don't know how many kids are going to be born in 2021, they haven't released that data yet. Like this year, next year, it's like a rolling average of the 3 years prior. So as you can see in the past, there was, you know, around 1,800 births, then it was dropping to 1,615. A little bit of a jump in 2015. So you kind of had this increase in your class sizes that then dropped back down and has continued to decrease. And we've seen those decreases consistently across the US, especially in urban areas. We've seen increases in some of the more suburban areas, but overall, people are having fewer children, waiting longer to have them, like not having children in major cities. Urban areas are just getting hit really hard. So that trend is not unique to your district. It's something we've seen everywhere, and there's not much you can do about that. Like that's just what it is with who's being born of who currently lives here. I put up a chart kind of showing, I've heard different terms for it, market share, but it's really the correlation of how many kindergarten students you had versus what the birth rates were. And since I had the data from 2017, it's showing like in 2017, which would be children born in 2012, you're around 55%, went down to 52 to 55, down to 45 in 2020, then back up to close to 50%. So this little tiny map here is not really showing, that's your district. And those are the 3 major zip codes that are serving your district. As you can see, they expand outside of your boundaries. So while there's all these children that might be born in 78221, they're not necessarily all assigned to your district. Many of them are assigned to a different one. So that's not saying that half the kids are opting out of your district. That's just, for the most part, they're just assigned to a different school. But it's also just the ratio wise, we're not seeing a significant drop. So that's an indicator that it's not so much external factors like charter school competition or homeschooling options. While that does play a part, it's not drastic because your your percentage of those bursts is still close to where it has been over the last few years. Does that make sense? Sorry. I hope. All right. So for mobility factors, this is looking at each year. If you were to have like 100 kindergartners in 2017, you would expect 100 first graders in 2019 and 100 second graders in 2020, et cetera. If everybody were to go to their school and stay in Harlandale ISD and just everything was perfect, but we know that's not the case. You do have an uptick in kindergarten to first grade. Most of the time that's because if kindergarten is not required or they do it at a different program and then come into the district at the first grade level, that's where you see the green. Red, it's people leaving. You don't have these really huge numbers when you see stuff in the 0.89. You're like, okay, something's happening where we've got kids leaving this school when they get to third or fourth grade, whatever it is. Looks like 3 to 4 all across elementary. There is some sort of loss. That could be where if there's a competing charter school or parochial school that were to start at grade 4 that people are opting for, or if it was something where that was a challenging grade, so more kids were getting held back in third grade. These are just kind of factors that you can look at your mobility and say, okay, what could be causing this? What could we do about it? It's very normal to see this large increase in ninth grade. There's a lot of other options. Lost the word, but schools that go to like 8th grade and then they'll come to the district for 9th. Going on to 10th, 11th, 12th, we do see a lot of red in high school as kids do drop out or might be held back to take classes again. You've got good numbers from 11th to 12th grade of as far as like getting kids to stick around and graduate. So that's a good thing. But it's pretty consistent. 10th, 11th grade, you're seeing drops across the board. Even though we are looking at middle and high school levels here, this is all kind of broken down by elementary zone because it was like the smallest scale to get those numbers. So even though it's not like specific, you only have 2 high schools, you can see which specific areas, what elementary zones you are having those problems with. Also helps identify if you know there's like a charter school or some competitor right by that school that's taking your students, that would offer an explanation.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you go back to that chart? I'd like to find out, what does the blue represent?
So a
'Cause,
blue,
I'm thinking the red that's where we lose.
yes,
And green is where we're gaining,
yes.
but the blue.
Blue is
there's no
blue is
graph,
like
charter.
blue
Chart.
is the same number. It's like everybody went to kindergarten, then they went on to first grade. Granted, I doubt that it's actually every single student is the same, but whatever losses and gains kind of wash each other out. So if you were to have like the blue ones all the way across the board, your enrollment and your kindergarten enrollment now would be like that number would be the same down the road once they're in 12th grade. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
well, kind of. So you're referencing 2 high schools, but we have STEM high school. And so that's not factored in here.
This is not considering where they enrolled whatsoever. This is strictly looking at students that are enrolled at your district by grade level.
that might necessarily,
Spatially,
because it was
yes.
like the grade levels, you factored it out into the grade levels. And so I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah. It's
it's for all of our high schools.
yes, it's for all of your high schools. The reason it's still broken into the elementary zones to help get an idea of which of those neighborhoods it is. So for example, in Adams, it's saying if you had 100 8th graders or whatever, once we get into the 9th grade zone, in just that Adams Elementary area of kids that attend your schools, we see an uptick to where you've now got 120 9th graders, 123 9th graders attending. It could be either of your feeder schools or like a magnet school, but they are living in your district and attending one of your schools. So, yes. And so And that's all based on looking at, it just goes 3 years back. So it's looking at 2018 to 19, 19 to 20, 20 to 21. That doesn't want to go too far back or too few years, because we've kind of found that the 3 years back is a good spot to make sure it doesn't include any anomalies that are or bubbles in grade configurations. So it's meant to really track the movement within your district across existing neighborhoods. So like if there was a study, like some of the areas where there have been new homes, we're not going to consider that in the mobility calculation, because we know there's more kids there because there's new homes. So this is strictly to try to explain what's going on in your existing houses, whether it's students moving out of the district or into the district or opting for something else. Any more questions on this slide?
Yes, Mr. Demac.
So on the Adams example, so it goes up in ninth grade. So are you saying that the next one's 0.083? Then they like 50 kids left?
It's
Because the 8 is 0.83.
so
40 kids left?
what that could, it could be they left, or it could be maybe
They were retained.
they were retained. So oftentimes, because you do see this very large number in 9, it's partially because you're gaining students at the high school level, also partially because you had these students that were in 9th grade last year and they're in 9th grade again. Therefore, your 10th grade number is lower because they didn't move on to 10th grade, but they didn't necessarily leave. So unfortunately, we don't know or have that information for you, but internally, you can probably pull up and see when you see those really high 9th grade numbers followed by a really low 10th grade, unless you do see a lot of people just dropping out after 9th grade or leaving the district to go somewhere else, then you could say, okay, we've got a lot of students in this area. Like, so one reason we're going to break it down is sometimes you can say, okay, wherever this particular zone is, what can we do to help that area or to keep them around or whatever it is. So again, I don't have all of the answers to the questions. This kind of helps open up, but the idea for it is to say, this is what's happening. And then hopefully with your resources, you can use it to help make decisions that are helpful. So when I talk about student yield factors in your residential development, again, you're pretty much like established neighborhoods all around, but you have these areas now that are being built. You have the big KB Homes community. I just drove through it. They've got about 3 homes up, but you know, the roads are there. I've seen these places pop up pretty fast. So we like to look at similar homes. So the 312 single family detached homes, these are ones that were built within the last 5 to 10 years, like a lot of the Pleasanton Farm areas over there, to see, I look at those parcels, I look at where your students are, like how many students live in these homes. So that gives us an idea, okay, how many can we expect from these new homes? It's broken down by grade configuration. Overall, it works out to 0.583, which would be for every 100 homes. It's like 58 new kids to your district. So, and then you will also see an effect later on as, you know, there might be more bursts in the area 5 years down the road, or 6 years. It just depends. We don't know who's moving into these homes. But there is they're around $200,000. So it's really hard to buy a home right now for families. So I've seen similar homes like this in other areas really boom with kids, because apartments are also very expensive, which is insane. I live in Dallas, which we're going through. I'm not going to go off on a rant about how expensive rent is, but I'm just saying, you know, so this is something like when I was driving through today, since we're still doing work with you guys, I'm following up on it to say, okay, how fast are these getting built? I will then look at your current data, like how many people are living in some of these ones in Pleasanton Farms that I know were just built, like they're almost done finishing that little neighborhood. And if it's higher than this, I could say, okay, look, you're actually getting more kids. You might be able to see more of an uptick. That's what we hope for. But I can only work with like the data I have. If we look at like an overall view of your entire district, it's not as telling because you have older homes that the kids don't live at anymore. So we want to look at like to like. So
Chair.
as I kind of mentioned in the geocoding,
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Moreno, go ahead.
So I just wanted to touch on, and
Yeah.
You mentioned the new homes.
Yes.
So can you explain perhaps where you gather that data? Is it just from the city?
we get stuff from the city, we look at the parcel data, talking to the developer, stuff that's been received from the district. I know news articles, just,
Yeah.
and then when we get into planning out the phasing of it, I will, use satellite imagery. Sometimes I always do drive it myself when I'm in town as well. Just,
So in the 5 years or so, it's only been 312 homes, you said, that are apart from the
yes,
residential areas?
that comes from the Bexar County data where I can look at the year that the
How
homes were
about
built.
rehabs? Because I know that's been a big thing in our communities. Have you,
With-
did you gather that data?
No, that's not something that we've come across where there's been a large amount of like students generated from that. Is that what you're seeing where there's like
Yeah, I mean,
students?
it's just like you have a lot of people coming in buying homes. Like you mentioned, we have an older population.
Mhm.
Families either sell it or they lose it. And then these people come in and they've been buying them up and rehabbing homes like crazy. in
I
our
was,
neighborhood.
yeah,
So I don't know how that factors in.
those things tend to get picked up by those mobility factors. So for example, when we see certain neighborhoods that might be experiencing a lot of decrease, like in Dallas, for example, I would notice, okay, this area had all these apartments and family homes, and now it's been demolished. And now they're putting up these swanky apartments with hair salons and dog parks. And they're very like, $5,000 a month for a studio. So we go, okay, so this has been a situation of this neighborhood is now being gentrified and being targeted more towards young singles and families. But that gets reflected in kind of the mobility because those things tend to happen over time. It's not so sudden of like, sometimes they can come in and do quite a bit, but when you start seeing those negative numbers in the mobility, that's when you can see, oh, some of these old homes are just getting flipped and not really getting kids, or they are. But as far as applying the student yields to those, we don't. It's just too much work. Like the payoff of the time it would take to identify all of those individual places and flag them and see the results. It's not possible of this. Does that answer your question? I do.
And it, but I was just like, well, I think that would be an element to consider as well.
It is definitely.
But I mean, I guess based off of it, it's just not conducive to the,
correct.
the
Like,
efficacy of you guys doing what you need to
as
do.
far as I are part of it, as like when I worked for a district, it was something I kept my eye on internally to say, okay,
Yeah, because I mean,
What are
me,
the effects of this?
walking and going in my neighborhoods, I see
yes,
the homes being flipped and I get the calls all the time from my house, from my
yes.
parents' house. And so
These
I mean,
there's so much.
it's
that-
pretty prevalent and prominent throughout.
Yeah.
Not to say
Yeah.
they're being gentrified like downtown San Antonio or the east side,
Yeah,
but it is, developments of being rehabbed constantly. I'm seeing a new house being rehabbed.
yes, we face that as well. And I'm assuming you're not seeing.
And
a
then
whole
we
lot of
can,
new
we
students
see the
coming from that.
comparison when we do our protests
Yeah,
as well, because then you're like, oh, now this house is built from 1924, but now it's being trying to sell it for 300,000, and you're like, oh,
yeah.
we're being compared to that. So those are
Yeah.
just things that I think, it is important to consider.
I agree. It's definitely very important to consider. And I do feel like you will probably notice in those mobility numbers that you see a lot of red in those elementary zones where more of that's happening. You're probably going to see higher numbers. But yeah, internally, it's absolutely critical to kind of monitor that thing, especially when it comes to apartments. If you have a lot of apartments that house a lot of students, that it's like they can just get bought up and cleared out. And then there's nowhere to go because everything got really expensive. But that's enough on that bleak topic. So the attendance matrix was saying, you know, after we cleared your zones and got everybody geocoded, we could see you have these kids that live here that are in this grade. It's supposed to go to Adams Elementary. I'm going to use Adams as the example because it's first. So the campus capacity is 970 students. There were 581 elementary students that live in that boundary that if they were to type in their address, they'd be told to go to Adams. 584 are enrolled, which is close to the same number of students there, which is why your capacities, or your utilization, I show resident students, like if you only accommodated the kids that live in your zone and you were very strict and these were the only kids there, that's what your capacity, your utilization would be 59.9%. With your enrolled students, it's 60.2 because you kind of leveled things out. But then you see you have 62 students that are transferring into Adams that actually do not live in the zone, and 84 are transferring out. They live in Adams, but they are attending a different elementary school. In the report, there is a full matrix. It's a ton of numbers, so it can be very dizzying, but it details where each student is opting to go. Like 9 might go to Bel Air, 2 might go to Carabel, whatever those numbers are, it explains all of that. So when you see the non-resident students, those are students that don't even live inside your district boundary. They are zoned to a different district, but they are coming into your district. So the total transfers in, that's simply just the sum of your non-resident plus your resident. Of course, it's 86, students transferring out was 84, so it kind of was a wash. But you can see in other zones like Gillette, if you were only serving the kids there, your utilization would be right around 60% because of transfers in and the non-resident students. You get 73 coming in from outside of the district. That's bringing your utilization up to over 70%. So this kind of summary here is a good way to, when you're looking at overall of what schools are, losing students for whatever reason, or which ones are underutilized or overutilized, where are we getting a lot of transfers? This table is there to kind of show that. Like all in all, you have 356 just elementary students that are coming in from outside your district. So by allowing those students in, it is helping keep your population from dropping as much. So for your overall elementary school trends, this chart, as you can see, like this is looking at resident students. I'm sorry, I keep hitting this microphone. Because we do forecast on the children of residents, not enrollment. It's going to be lower because those out of district students aren't counted in this. So if those numbers don't match up, that's why it's off by about 350 students. Because just for looking at resident students, we can't determine how many from out of district are going to come, but we just kind of assume the same trend. But as you see that drastic drop over the last few years kind of leads to things continuing to decline, but stabilizing. Like in the last, was it 2028 on to 2031, you're staying in the 4,260 range. So it's, of course, granted, if birth rates were to keep dropping, that could get lower. Likewise, if development picks up more, you get more students, that could be higher. But at least things are not like on a perpetual plunge at that level. And then the color coded area, like each of those study areas, some seem kind of large, but like in right zone, you've got an airport, so there's no kids there, but they all have like less than 50 students in them. So it's kind of broken down by neighborhoods. And the darker green is the higher growth, light green is very minimal growth. The orange is just the small loss and the red's the bigger losses. But when you have that much, just even a little bit of loss all across the district and in some of those bigger areas, that's what's kind of feeding the overall decline. And there's not much where you have large growth. Obviously you have the area in Schultz where we've got the development. And I did that in, that's like a net change number because it's more telling than doing a percentage. Because sometimes it'll be like one student is 100% and skews the math. But for middle school, because that decrease in the last few years is not really going to hit middle school. So later you see a continual decline all the way down to like 1,538.9 kids by 2031. As you can see in the map, there's really no dark green other than the area with the development. A little bit of areas where you might gain a few kids, but it's seeing loss pretty much all around the district. And then high school, kind of similar to middle, but we are seeing like this uptick this year. The decreases don't really hit again until that matriculation then hits the high school level. So you see more drastic drops in the last 4 to 5 years. The good thing is it gives you some time to plan. As you know, the matriculation is going to start affecting your middle and high schools a little later on. You can start coming up with what to do. So district wide, so these numbers, like, again, right now it's showing like the 10,864.5 for 2022. That's not considering the almost 1,000 out of district students that you would have. So your enrollment number forecasted for this year was closer to 1,200. It's just, this is showing the forecast strictly for your resident students. And decreasing to, right now, we're looking at 8,000 by 2031. And this is just the pre-K through 12 grades in the same map, just to show the areas. I guess pretty much all over is loss, with some bigger losses in these specific neighborhoods, and really the only growth being where the development is. So now that's all I have except for questions. So
I do. I have a
Yes.
question. So you mentioned that Schultz would lose more than any other campus.
Yes.
However, on that PowerPoint number 11, that is the area of more growth.
Right.
So is it more growth, not more population?
it's what it did was, like, that particular zone was set to be losing even more. And so it's counteracted that. So
Okay, no, explain it to me again, please, because
Yeah,
I'm not understanding it all.
so basically, if Shoals was on track to lose 300 students or whatever the number is, when we add in the development, we're going to now be getting a couple hundred students from that. So your net loss is now only 130, while you're still losing, like, it's still being the hardest hit zone. It's not as critical because you have the development. And then once we see, like, if this does end up attracting more elementary students and maybe the student yields implied, that decrease could actually change where you do see growth. But this is just the areas aside from that green, like, you've got a lot of red and orange in that zone as well. So the growth is specifically for that study area within the entire Schultz zone, but the sum of the red and orange is still higher of a loss than what we're gaining.
Okay, and so I understand that. Why is Schultz the campus that would be losing the most? Aside from the development forecasted, why?
Well,
I'm
let's
just curious.
go back to, so you have only 36 students transferring in, 71 transferring out. So for, like, then you got 31 coming in, your net would be, I mean, it's still within 4 students total, but there are students up. So this one, since it's more towards the boundary, could attract more out of district students and make more of an impact. But with 71 that are in your district opting for other schools, that can be part of it. And then when we look at your mobility, you have some of the lowest mobility numbers in that zone. So it's one of the only ones that's not really seeing an increase in first grade. You've got a decrease going into second. The only increase is seen from second to third grade. So I don't personally know why, but if there is something going, like there might be a lot of gentrification going on there. There might be something going on at that campus that's causing people to leave. There might be a charter school that's heavily targeting that area. Like these are things that I don't have the answers for, but I hope that with the data provided, y'all can like do some digging to figure out, okay, what's going on? Why are we losing here so much?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Great.
Questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Martin.
So I guess just referring back, I know our previous superintendent brought us a report that was kind of alluding to, or, you know, kind of giving us an idea of where things were heading. And you kind of indicated, and this is not a HISD, Harlandale ISD problem. This is a statewide, like you referenced first, right? And a lot of it has to do based off of low birth rate, which can be implicated or impacted by a variety or myriad of factors such as the pandemic, the housing crisis,
Mhm.
the, you know, loss of job or income,
Yeah.
I have to wait like myself to be 36, 37 to have kids,
Yeah.
you know, so how, and then I know you mentioned it, is there another way to kind of explain it to us in a way that, you know, some of these neighborhoods, perhaps we are going to see an influx of adults, you know, my age, 35 to 40, and, you know, having families perhaps at 40, 45. Was that factored in, or how did y'all see that, or where was that classified at?
It's not really factored in. What I will say is we do work all over the nation.
Yeah.
I work in Texas primarily. So, and I've created a lot of maps kind of just to look at the trends over the last several years, and what we've consistently seen. It's red decreases on the city centers. We've got Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio. The closer to the city center, rapid decreases, and it's going further and further out. Even a lot of the established suburbs
Mhm.
that were solid, great school districts, like coveted people moving there, have then just been kind of filled up, changing, people moving
Plateaued and stuff,
further
yeah.
out. When COVID happened, what we kind of, our assumptions are you have families that then they try these other alternatives, or there's virtual school, but also so many companies switch to allowing work from home, freeing people to move, to go say, okay, well, if I sell my house to this developer that wants, like, I can't afford my taxes anymore, it's gentrifying, I'm going to sell my home, I'll go move out, even though it's an hour from downtown, but I can afford a home, work from home. That's what we're seeing. So it's this kind of explosion effect of just loss in the cities, and people have already been like the slowingness of births is from, you know, housing prices going up and people waiting longer. I
And
know
then
the
you also
last-
got to think about like the nuclear family or the non-traditional families.
Correct.
You know, these people they are buying, different people are buying homes, and they may not be looking to have families or
Yes.
equipped to be able to have families, or not
Absolutely.
looking towards it. And
There's
So-
a lot of variables. Also with a lot of the politics that have been going on, we've seen in families where there's refugees or there's just any illegal immigrants that might be now scared. There's been landlords that have been doing really horrible things of threatening people to be like displaced or deported. So more people out of fear have just kind of moved further out too.
And do you know, because based off of that kind of just triggered another question. You know, we have some families that, you know, everywhere, right? Where they may be not here legally, or they were just, you know, we have an element of undercounting in terms of the census. Is that considered too? Is there like a plus or minus type of thing when we're looking at the data?
There's not, we don't consider that we count everybody the same. So they're just gonna fall into that trend. So,
Be like an inordinate amount. It just, I know there's like
right.
a segment of it that it's, oh, that could be another 2% or 3
Right.
percentages.
Yeah, that's not differentiated, but
Okay.
it's one of those things where when we see this trend of loss, we know that's probably one of the factors.
Okay. And the last question I have is just to clarify, because I know you kind of, I believe you did answer it, but based on the last 3 slides,
Mhm.
you're saying that doesn't consider out of district transfers, right? Because you don't have that data and you can't, it's kind of volatile.
Right, but in the report that's, like, I'll have a copy of somewhere there, I do have tables with like all of the numbers by school where I can forecast your resident students, but then I also look at, okay, if your enrollment was this, let's follow that same trend. So it's gonna assume you have that same kind of ratio of out of district students to give you a enrollment forecast that will be higher or sometimes lower depending on the school, but it'll also kind of consider like any case where there's maybe a like trying to see one that's got like Gillette or something where it's enrolled students is like so much higher, you're gonna see that higher number go throughout the forecast. Likewise, if the enrolled number is lower, like in Wright, then that enrollment forecast will be a little bit lower than the resident students. But again, it's all kind of done by resident students. So you can say, okay, at the end of the day, we know we have this many kids.
Okay. So when you look on
that
the
we're serving.
table, you'll forecasted students will kind of have that kind of reference within,
Yes.
embedded within it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I see the difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Luna.
I just know, I've been here 37 years in the district and you just made me realize that, I guess the kids I taught are really not having kids because we're decreasing. I still see them in the neighborhood,
It's,
but I don't see them with a lot of kids.
yeah,
And I don't see a lot of, like, the trick or treat, I had 10 kids in my
yeah.
neighborhood. And I
it-
used to have 40, 50 kids.
mhm. I've,
So,
my colleagues that are in their 20s, they're like, we're not having kids.
I know the millennial stereotype, I know.
Yeah.
My mom always says, do you have any kids? No. Are they even married? No, they're not married. They live at home.
My 2 youngest ones, they're both 23. They're still living with their families out of college because, it's too hard. One of them's engaged, but she's like, well, I don't think we're having kids because can't really afford to move out. And like, once we can't afford to move out, then like, that's all your money.
But at the same time, I do think the charter schools are taking some of our kids
Yeah, that is. a
because they
little-
got to go in somewhere and those charter schools are populated with kids
They
from somewhere.
they are very strategic in what they do. They hit Dallas very hard going into areas that didn't have as many magnet schools or whatever and marketing like crazy. So there's been this kind of having to rethink how school districts even work because before you had neighborhood schools and kids go to your schools. And now suddenly you've got these other like people coming in, sending mailers to your students saying, oh, come over here, you get uniforms, it's perfect. Everybody graduates, but it's not always true. But it's always something to keep an eye on. It's a weird thing to kind of have to look at this is something like a competitive market because we're talking about children and that should not, it's weird to think of children as some sort of commodity that now we're competing over getting their service. But unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at. And you can't offer the things you need to offer students if they're not enrolled in your district. So it's not an easy job that you all have. So
Anybody else?
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
If I could. Going back to the elementary attendance area and student density, I didn't understand that map because in Stonewall, Flanders, you show that as the most dense, one of the most dense areas in the school district.
Mhm.
Is that Mr. Luna's
it's
area?
kind of,
I'm just asking, is that is that y'all's area?
Because when you go into like the Gillette area, it's more spread out. So you go to our areas, we're like, we can draw, we can drive through it and it's like.
Yeah.
So that's why the population density is based on how close it is.
Yeah.
And
It's
so when
going
we-
to be looking at how
We
many
have more people. which is-
exist within,
Well, what student density, right? So I'm thinking student counts. Am I not supposed to think that student density
it
means
is,
a higher cluster of students there? Because I'm thinking
it's one
that
of those things, it's
that's,
kind of hard to like wrap your brain around because it's looking at it's all your students pre-K through 12, right? And then distributing them across this area of space. So the density is like, well, you might have, I'm just gonna use 100 because it's a simple number. If you had 100 students in Shoals, but they're spread out over a much larger space, and then maybe you only have 75 in Stonewall Flanders, but they're all in this one little neighborhood. That's why you're gonna see the yellow and orange there. It's because it's a denser collection of students. And so these kinds of maps are more beneficial for when you're considering, okay, what parts of my district, like if you're going to be rezoning or something, or saying, okay, this bound, like the right bound, it's really huge, but there's no kids over on that eastern portion. So, we don't need to worry about that. But we've got like a lot of density. It also kind of helps when you're looking at transportation planning and different things like that to kind of visualize where these neighborhoods are that have a lot of kids. You'll probably find you might have some apartment complexes and where those really kind of more specific, smaller bubbles of density are. So it's a lot of students in a small area. Does that help?
no.
No?
But so my question, Mr. Soto, is given the information that she is presenting, we obviously need to formulate a marketing plan. Is that where we're going with this kind of information? Because if I were to look at the student density map, I would say that we would probably be targeting Stonewall Flanders, but I know that we need to be targeting the Schultz attendance zone because that's the only area we can grow.
Well, here's the thing too, like, if you're trying to attract students, you want to go where you don't have density. Because these are students that are enrolled in your school. Like you have these kids.
But we want to keep them.
Yeah, if you want to keep them, like, yes, keep them areas where there's just like nobody. If there's a neighborhood on here that's got kids living in it and it's just very sparse, that would be an area of like, okay, there's kids here. They're not our kids. Where are they?
Ms. Ortiz, to answer your question, Board of Trustees, is this plan, this study is showing us on how we're gonna have to be strategic to right size our district. We're gonna have to right size our district. We're gonna have to repurpose some facilities. We are going to have to combine resources. If we want to stay competitive with our staff salaries, our teacher salaries, and stay up there in the top 5, this is basically telling us that we have to right size our district. Marketing, I think we've done a pretty good job of marketing. As you can see, the influx of kids that have come in from outside of the district, that was that one chart. But basically it's also with the caveat that there is a shortage of teachers. There is a shortage of manpower out there. Dr. Salinas went to a job fair today at South Texas State. I want to call it Southwest University. That's how old I am, right? So they made their students just attend it, even though they already had a job offer. And I believe we ended up grabbing 2 people, hopefully. But there's just not enough. There's just not enough manpower out there, and this is the whole state of Texas. So we're gonna have to right size our district, and we're gonna have individual conversations, and then we're gonna have some town hall meetings, and we're gonna have community meetings. We're gonna form a committee, and we want to share this information of what Harlandale looks like in 10 years.
Okay, so Mr. Moreno made reference to this study or having access to this study.
We
by the
didn't, we didn't have
previous-
access to it. He gave us like, when we were looking at the selling of land, he was like, this is the emphasis of why we need to do it. We're having this conversation because we're losing kids. And at the time, it was 2016, 2017. We were not looking to entertain that yet. I think it was good for this board to proceed with looking at getting that done, because the piece that we need is human capital.
Right.
So it was, we didn't have access to this. He just had an article from the Express News and he was like, look, this is what I'm referencing. This is what we're noticing. This is what we're seeing. This is where it's getting, and this is pre-COVID. So,
Right,
I mean, it's even more drastic now, I think.
yeah.
You're exactly right, Mr. Moreno. I believe it was a Templeton report, right? Because he kept saying Templeton report. I was in cabinet at that. I was in cabinet at that time, but he's also TA had a report that just shared with districts in the state of Texas that showed the birth rates going down throughout the state of Texas. This is just not a demographer from Davis telling us the birth rates here at Harlandale. This is statewide.
Mhm. Yeah. One more, like on student, the reason that I'm showing you a student density map and not something more specific, we're very respectful of student data and keeping that like protected. So we can't, I can't show you a dot on a map that says there's a student that lives right here. So that's why you're getting this kind of looks like some sort of something under a microscope, but it's a way to kind of highlight where your kids are without saying, we've got kids right here.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I
Yes,
may.
Mr. Moreno.
So kind of going off of that, I know the area that we're kind of referencing in Schultz, there is a high level of residential areas, and like you noted, they're not necessarily zoned to us. You have everything down 410 that's going from A&M San Antonio all the way to Roosevelt, and even down Roosevelt towards where I work at. Now, I know we can't get specific numbers on that, but are those homes being purchased as well, or is there any idea of what you know? Because they're popping up already, and they've been popping up all the way to even closer to Southwest where Bob Hope Elementary is at.
Yeah, I've seen, I mean, just driving in here, I came up 410 and I was kind of pulled over. I saw Spanish Trails, I saw the meadows, and I was like, wow, but they're not in your district. I just remember seeing them in the research. There's some, south.
Because I know they're so
as well.
close that they could,
Yeah.
matriculate towards us in a sense, because it's literally around the corner.
Right.
But I don't know if they're being sold. Like I seen them going up, but I don't know if they're selling because
They
the
do
rates are
seem to.
horrible right now.
Right. I know that what I was like, even just the ones I drove through on my way here, there were sold signs on many of the lots that weren't even built yet. So, and that's just like on the one that's fairly new. So other areas we're seeing them sell, gosh, before anyone's even looked at them. So one thing I will do is, when we do this updated report, like you can kind of see the light blue at the bottom of the density map, like it's spreading outside your district where you've got, okay, here's some kids right here. But when we go in and geocode all of your new students, I can say, oh, look, this one this new development that's not in your district, but maybe you have a lot of kids coming from there. We can identify it that way. If it's somewhere where you're like already getting students from an established new neighborhood outside your boundaries.
And so, and I know with the granary, we're not necessarily given, daily updates, obviously, because it's not our property, but with that, were they able to give you an idea of how they're doing in terms of forecasted or how they are doing actually selling the homes?
Yeah, I will be following up with some phone calls to them in the next few weeks. We like to talk to a few different people because I don't think it's ever lined up with what they tell me is what actually happens. But developers like KB Homes usually have a turnaround of like 6 months. And so once those streets get in, since they have, it's like, you pick your home and then they put it up, it goes pretty fast. And so I know there were some in Judson, I believe, that I had kind of witnessed. There's not that many KB Homes up for in my other districts, but I've seen those come in pretty rapid. So we often see 100 homes like built and occupied each school year for subdivisions of that size. I believed I put it in to kind of be completed over 5 years with your first occupant starting next year. Yeah. And so it's one of those things we kind of like follow up on and say, okay, how's that going? Is it moving faster or slower? And then also as we have these student generation rates, as we keep looking at those, when something happens or changes, it helps to plan to say, oh crap, they just put 200 more up really fast for some reason. Cause I don't know, you could say, let's go ahead and assume we're gonna get another 30 kids. Just some simple math, but yeah, well, I always drive it. I always see, a lot of times people will be like, yeah, we're gonna have it all complete by next year. And I drive it, and it's like, nothing. They haven't turned any dirt yet, or they don't have water. So we do a combination of talking to the developers, talking to the city, and then also looking at it. And then from there saying, okay, realistically, this is when it's going to happen. And we're kind of pretty good at it, I think.
Anybody else? Well, it's a lot to process.
Yes.
I know we're gonna have conversations that we would like to avoid. But in order for us to maintain ourselves as a thriving district and retain the teachers that we have and attract more teachers, some difficult decisions may need to be made. But it will allow us to think outside the box
Mhm.
and get clever and creative
Yeah.
in our district. So thank you so much.
You're very
Just
welcome.
a question though, if we do need a little bit more of an explanation in one particular matter, can we email Mr. Soto and then he can ask the question and
Absolutely.
then,
It's got my
Okay.
contact info.
thank
and
you so
yeah,
much.
I am, again, in the process of updating your study for this year as well. So I'll be in communication, be back out here at some point soon.
Thank you very much.
Keep everything
Thank you.
updated for you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's all. I'm gonna head back to Dallas now.
Safe trip, safe trip. Moving on to agenda item 4, Mr. Soto.
Yes, Madam Chair, Board of Trustees, Ms. Casey will be presenting our CIP and our DIP, the next two items.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cavazos and board members. We have every year we are required to complete a CIP and a campus improvement plan and a DIP, a district improvement plan. The plans have to be approved by the board. And what a campus does is they typically have a needs assessment. They look at their data, they look at their needs, and then they determine what are the strategies, the goals they'll have for that year and the strategies they'll be developed. What we ask every principal to do, they first develop their plan in Plan for Learning. It's a software program where we house all of our campus improvement plans and district improvement plans. And we ask them to submit what we call an executive summary. It's a one-page report that gives a highlight of what their CIP or DIP and the DIP is. Those are typically between 20, 30 pages. And so this is just a highlight and overview. They start on page, I believe, 15 of your board book. Adams, if you look at Adams, they are focusing on all of their content areas that are STAR tested. And this is just a high level. This does not mean that they're not focusing on other areas as well. They look at growth, common formative assessments, PLCs as a strategy, and then of course, social emotional learning or our students' well-being and teachers as well. Bel-Air is also looking at all tested subject areas with the focus on growth, but they also, their campus needs assessment determined they would look at the culture and climate of their campus, and of course, safety, security, staff recruitment and retainment, and then parent and community involvement is an area of focus for them. Carol Bell, of course, all subject areas again, and every campus is looking at growth in basically every subject area. Carol Bell's focus is PLCs, social emotional learning, culture and climate, and the safety and security of their campus. All of our schools are required to look at different areas. We asked all our schools to look at attendance, as that is an area of focus for our district. But these are the areas for their campus where they saw the biggest need and the biggest need for it to address. At Collier, they're looking at PLCs and social emotional learning as well. Columbia Heights, culture and climate is a huge focus of theirs with safety and security, and of course, social emotional learning and growth in all areas. Gilbert is looking at all academic areas, growth, and that's something you've heard since last year. We are looking at accelerating all of our students' learning and their growth. And Gilbert is also looking at professional learning communities, social emotional learning, the culture and climate, and then parent and community. Those are all areas that came out as a need in their needs assessment. At Gillette has a primary focus on academics. One thing that stood out about Gillette's goal is that most of our schools, and they're at a different level, are looking at improving all of their meets numbers, where Gillette is really looking at their master's level. So they're at a different starting point when you look at their data, and so their goals and their ending points a little different. Morrill is our campus, and the growth is a focus in all areas, looking to improve it through professional learning communities, social emotional learning, community and culture and safety and security, as well as parent and community involvement and attendance, which is an area they really want to focus on. Rayburn is looking at common formative assessments, professional learning communities as well, as an effort to improve the growth in all academic areas of their campus. Schultz is looking at all academic areas, growing in those with the use of professional learning communities, social emotional learning, and then focusing on culture and climate at their campus, as well as RTI, or response to intervention time, where they can provide interventions for students that are requiring assistance. Stonewall Flanders is also looking at professional learning communities, social emotional learning, and culture and climate, as well as intervention for their students. Vestal is really focusing on reading and math as their areas for growth, and with the use of professional learning communities, social emotional learning, and culture and climate, and safety and security, with also looking at response to intervention, providing intervention to students and attendance as well. Wright is really looking at professional learning communities, and they really chose to focus on math as an area of improvement. Wright was one of our campuses. They were rated very high. It was our highest rating elementary school. Wetzel is our campus where we house our transition and our HOP center, and they are really looking at social emotional learning of students and the culture and climate of their campus, and of course, involving the parent and community, as many of our students there work in the community as part of preparation for post-secondary training. Our alternative center, their data is directly connected to each campus. So their primary focus is social emotional learning for our students, the attendance of the students, and then looking at restorative discipline for all students there at the campus. Harlandale Middle is looking to grow in all of our content areas and using professional learning communities and focusing on parent community, connecting with parent community as one area of improving. Kingsborough Middle School is also looking at all content areas with growth and looking to use professional learning communities, social emotional learning, culture, climate, safety and security, and then of course, attendance. Liao is really looking at reading and math as their focus and growth in those areas. Liao is professional learning communities and the culture, the climate of their campus, as well as parent and community, and then of course, response to intervention. You see a lot of themes. These are kind of the areas of focus that you'll see it as in our district improvement plan that we provide support to at all the campuses from a district level. Terrell Wells is looking at all content areas as well as culture and climate. Terrell Wells has something a little different. They would like to look at connecting students to school, making sure that every student has the opportunity to participate in at least one extracurricular, either club or organization. And that's a focus of theirs that's a little different from others. Frank Tejeda Academy, of course, is our dropout recovery school, and they are looking at growth of students, and looking at professional learning communities as the primary driver for that. Harlandale High School is looking at reading and math for growth in that area. And their areas that they're going to focus on are social and emotional learning. One of the beliefs is that without that, students aren't going to be able to achieve academically. And that looking at the culture and climate of the campus, the safety and security, and attendance and response to intervention. McCullum is also a campus looking to improve in all academic areas. They were a C campus and looking at culture and community of that campus, as well as attendance. And then STEM is looking to improve in all academic areas with professional learning communities, social emotional learning, parent and community attendance, and really an effort to participate in all the activities at the traditional high schools, not just at STEM Early High School, for the adults in that school as well as the students. For our district improvement plan, we are required to provide, when you look at our district improvement plan, our areas of focus are improving reading and math and at least getting back to pre-COVID levels in math, which we weren't at now, looking at growth across, and some of our major initiatives in curriculum at least are looking at through RSSP, looking at our PLCs, our common formative assessments, all of our initiatives through RSSP, which is our resilient school support program. Social emotional learning is a huge focus of our district. We provide support to our students and our staff and the family through various means. The culture and climate and safety and security has been a huge focus for us. It's something that we are consistently monitoring on a daily basis. And we are looking at attendance and parent and community involvement. One of the things we did with our district improvement plan is we continued what we did last year in the plan, but we've added some areas of focus. And the areas for this year that are new, which you have heard about at many board meetings, is school safety. That is something that we are implementing, monitoring, and improving every day. Increasing the enrollment and attendance rates at the district. That is something as the demographer just shared. Increase social emotional supports for students, staff, and families. It's a need that we have seen consistently across the district. Recruiting and retaining highly qualified teachers, something that we work on every day, talk about almost on a daily basis and plan to recover from. And then, of course, decreasing behavior concerns impacting student achievement, which is something we've seen an increase in. And that's what our district improvement plan, we've continued the initiatives from last year. And the last page of that includes our ESSER relief grant program with just a breakdown of how we're using ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. One of the statements I put at the end of that is that the district improvement plan and the campus improvement plans, they are regularly reviewed and we have checkpoints and updates. And at that time, we can at any point add information, anything that we need that may come up, we can adjust or make changes. So this is something that we monitor and we make changes on as needed based on the needs of the campus or district.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. Any questions for Ms. Casey? Yes, Dr. Castleberry.
Just a comment. I know a lot of work goes into the planning process, both at the campus level and the district level. It troubles me a little bit to see performance goals at 25% or less. And I think that our staff needs to think about that, because that is saying to parents that in that group, whatever it is, if it's math or science, that 1 in 4 students will meet that expectation. And I think our parents have higher expectations. And so I would just encourage the campus staffs that have created those goals to maybe re-examine and see if a higher target is more appropriate.
Okay. Just one thing, I'm not sure, I know the numbers vary depending on approaches, meets, and masters, and many schools are looking at where they're starting. Our master's numbers are oftentimes single digits. So if that's in reference to a master's number, that's pretty ambitious. So I'm not, but we can definitely go back and look at that.
Yeah, it's the meets
Meets.
that I would hope would be higher.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Luna? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Chair, as I'm addressing Mr. Soto, after hearing these goals, can we have a chart that compares the 2018 or pre-COVID data to these goals that we can have in front of us so we can compare? To see if these goals, like Dr. Castleberg is saying, these goals or gains are being achieved and can be achieved and can be realistic. Can we also see if these goals are being reflected, not only in our LSG goals, and then also, but also if it's reflected in the taper reports that come out? And basically, are we getting a return on ROI, return on investment on all the ESSER money that, I know we had grants and for coaches, et cetera, right, interventions. So trying to see how we're getting our bang for our buck on our ESSER grants. I know because we still have a few years, right, to 2024 to use those money. So that's where basically this reports make me think, like Dr. Castleberg mentioned, it does behoove me that the parents are going to hear that 1 out of 4 kids is only going to be achieving these goals. But so we have to present that data probably more positively or more achievable, whatever it's going to take to do. But thank you for doing that. I know it's a lot of work.
I just want to make sure I'm clear. So you want to look at the 2018 data.
Or the pre-COVID data, the data we have that's either 20, I don't know, 2019 data was,
Okay.
it was
and
affected, right? I think by COVID.
18,
2019 data.
19
Ms.
data was our
Cavazos.
last data set.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Cavazos,
Yes, ma'am.
if we're asking for the creation of reports that don't currently exist, then that needs to be a motion to the board to request that from the superintendent.
Okay.
Because, this is quite a bit of information that you're asking for.
All right. That's fine. Is there a report that states that, Mr. Soto?
We do have STAR data from pre-COVID. Is that what you're asking for?
Yes.
Yeah, we do have that, sir.
Okay.
So
that's
we
good.
can, what we can do is Ms. Casey, we can give them 2018 STAR data and then give them STAR data that is of
Current.
this past year that we received.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Ms. Carrillo, you wanted to get, oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Anybody else?
Madam Chair.
Yes, is that you, Mr. Moreno?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So just to clarify to Ms. Casey, again, I appreciate that we can put it into just like a fact sheet. I know it's a lot of time and effort in putting together a SIP and then also a district improvement plan. Monday, we're just gonna go ahead and have them. We're not gonna have everybody go up there, are we? We're just gonna approve them.
No, sir, this
It's
would be a
consent.
consent item on
All right,
Monday.
perfect. I just want to make sure because I know those are always, they can take a lot of time when we're going campus to campus, but I know a lot of this, the team puts in a lot of effort and, we definitely have to consider the smart aspects of it, like the realistic approaches. So I'm sure you guys will come back and y'all will huddle up and figure out a way to make sure it's appropriate for our communities. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Casey, I do have a question, and please forgive me for not understanding. I noticed that there seems to be, I don't want to say the word trend because that's the wrong word, but culture and climate of campus seems to be one focus that's in all or most of our campuses. Explain to me what that is, if you can, please.
So when you look at research on the culture and climate of a campus, it can range anywhere from high expectations for kids to how we treat adults. Oftentimes when our teachers leave or families leave, it's not because they're leaving because they didn't get the training or because they didn't, we didn't have students that they really enjoyed. They leave because of the culture of the campus. Are they treated with respect? Are there celebrations? Are we always available to listen to them when they need something? So is there pride in the school? Is there pride in their work? And so it's the things you can't necessarily see or touch or give a measurement for, but you get a feel of every time you walk into a school. It's probably one of the areas that help the most for our students and our families and kids right now as we're dealing a lot with social and emotional learning. And that's probably one of the biggest factors for our teachers that leave.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. I had an idea, but I wanted to clarify. This may sound completely not in the realm of education, but we're here on top of educating our teachers and staff and on top of educating our children and their families. We're also customer service. And I think that's really, really important, especially the part you said, are we there to listen? Because the voice of a student is just as important as the voice of their family and more so of the teachers and staff that we employ here. So I like really the fact that although this may not be a problem in our campuses, that it's always something that the campuses are focusing on year after year after year. So I really, really appreciate that that's not something that a campus says, okay, we're doing good, skip that for next year. It's always that reaffirm and reaffirm it. So thank you so much. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Ms. Casey. Moving on to agenda item 6, Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. This evening, we have the investment quarterly report as of the end of September 30th, 2022, that has a transmittal letter on page 43 of your board book. I'll cover some of the highlights of the changes from the last quarter on the investments. In our general fund, it decreased by 16 million, and that is due to every August, there's a state allotment payment that is skipped in order to have a settle up at the end of September. But also at that same time, we're ending our fiscal year on June 30th. So we hold off until we get final expenditures before we draw down, and that is an amount of about 8 million. So that's where our fund balance helps carry the district cash flow wise through its operations. The next fund, the debt service fund, there was a decrease of 6.4 million. And in August, that's when we make our bond payments of about 11.5 million. One of the offsets to this was our recent bond issuance in July, which as part of the bond series 2022A, we issued along with the bonds a premium, which provided extra cash that could go into the debt service fund. So that way we can use that money as we go through the later years to manage our tax rate. And that was something that was presented as part of the bond capacity plan by our financial advisor and our bond counsel. And then the next fund is our settlement fund. That was a decrease of 355,000. Now, in that settlement fund, that also provides the payments for our stadium construction. So we have payments of 1.6 million, but as part of our resources, we were using our settlement fund plus the unused bond proceeds of about 1.9. So we combined those so that way it gives us more effective management of the funds and the investments and the payments of those monies. The next fund, the facility assessment fund, again, that continues to go down because we're making progress on our initiatives. That was the reason for the assessment fund being, or the maintenance tax notes being issued. So we had 1.7 million in payments being made. 1.4 went to our high schools, 98,000 to our HVACs, and 368,000 to our gym floors. The next two funds, the general facilities fund and the stadium fund, that's a result of our bond issuance that we did in July. Now, this was the bond referendums that were passed in May. So we sold our bonds at the end of June and received the proceeds in July. So that's why it's reflected in this report. So we have 30.5 million that was deposited on July 20th. Since then, the board's taken action September 19th to approve Arquitectura SA to begin work with staff to start looking at the designs of our CTE building and our ROTC building and other initiatives. The stadium fund is then our bond proceeds. The amount of 9.5 million was also deposited on July 20th. And so that's has factored into the final amount for phase 2 of the 17.2 million, which 9.5 is making up that amount. The rest of it is coming from our settlement fund, partial amount from our maintenance tax notes for eligible costs. And then with those, then that provides our phase two for our construction. Madam Chair, and that provides the investment quarterly report. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Any questions or comments for Mr. Hernandez? I guess not, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you so much. But was that was 6 and 7? Or are you still going to do
No,
7?
she needs to
Okay,
do
okay.
7.
Mr. Hernandez, you're on.
Thank you, ma'am. The next quarterly report is our budget report, and it's very early. It's as of September 30th, and basically we've been in operation as of that date in school business for about a month and a half. So there's not much changes. Many of the amounts that are available in the budget are high because, again, we're just getting started with school. But we do know that when we did pass the budget, we had 123 millions that were budgeted in the general fund, 135 million of expected expenditures, thereby going into the year looking at a deficit of 12.1 million. And again, all that can vary depending on our spending, depending on our ADA throughout the year. Right now, we're seeing something positive. We do see increase, but of our ADA. But again, as we just heard this report, we just got to wait to as we get further on in the year to look at that. The other two budget reports that are reported is our Child Nutrition Fund and our Debt Service Fund. Again, the Child Nutrition Fund is operating efficiently. The managers and the staff, they do a great job in providing meals to our students. All our meals, again, are free. There are actually more meals being served in 21-22 than we had in the prior year. So, and even looking at what's been done in September, we see an uptick on the meals claim. So, that's great because we see our students eating the foods, eating the meals. The next item is then our debt service fund, and as I mentioned earlier, as part of the bond issuance, that provided the 4.7 million that is now included in debt service, and that's really going to have an impact on our ability to manage that tax rate in the bond capacity. So, Madam Chair, that concludes the quarterly report. Be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hernandez? Mr. Hernandez, I have a
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Child nutrition, are we get funding for every ADA, or is it the enrollment?
It's actually the meals served.
The meals served?
Yes,
Okay,
Meals served.
okay, thank you. That's the only question I have.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
And just to go that,
Yes,
ma'am,
Mr.
that's a battle every day. So even when they bring their own lunch, I still make them get their lunch because that's money on the table. We're literally leaving. So, I mean, we've talked about it every year, but it's extremely important. So just I don't care if you want it, just get it, sit down. Because the kids will always tell you, oh, you're wasting food. I'm like, theoretically, yes, but no, I need you to pick that up because I'll give it to somebody else. I don't care.
Sure, and that's important. And one of the unique things that we have here in the district is that we have breakfast in the classroom, and so that almost guarantees 100% participation. And with that amount of monies, it provides the stability in the child nutrition program because our district does serve free meals to all students. So I think recently we heard in the news that the federal government was taking some of that program away. So that was going to be affecting families that were paying meals and didn't have to anymore, but now have to resume that. And so that was going to be eating into their budget with the inflation affecting them as well. So then
Yeah, and that's a big thing too, because you'll hear it in certain circles that they'll disparage child nutrition programs, especially when we're serving 90%. They'll disparage, the program, and they don't realize that there are communities that really do utilize it and do use it well and effectively, versus others are like, oh, why am I paying for someone else's lunch? I don't even have any kids that go there, and it can get pretty vile.
Well, I know that in our community, it is much appreciated. The breakfast, the lunch, and the dinner, especially with our students that are in extracurricular and they don't get home until late. The meals that have been provided by our district, you know, after school, but not before they leave, is certainly appreciated in our community. So thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Hernandez on this particular agenda item?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Limon.
I know a time that they weren't able to take their food or put like the snacks in the backpack. How is it now? Are they able to pick maybe like an apple in the backpack or something?
So
'Cause I know one time it was like, no. So it's like, sometimes the kids don't eat, later on
Right.
and a meal in their backpack that, they find is it's like, oh, I got food.
So I believe what we have at our campuses is that we have an area where we have non-perishable items that can be placed in them along with food items, so that if a kid
Yeah.
wants extra items, they can go there and grab it. But
Yeah.
we've already been compliant because we've served them the full meals. These are items that are not perishable that are being made available to the students if they want to grab some more items. Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Okay, moving along to agenda item 8. Is that also you, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, ma'am. So this evening, we're presenting the budget amendments for November. And really, we have one budget item that's affecting our general fund. It's regarding our teacher incentive allotment program. This program under House Bill 3 recognizes our teachers at 3 different levels. And this program also, because of that, it'll generate additional funding for school districts. So the amendment this evening is to budget for the expected revenues that are going to be coming in related to that, either revenues or reimbursements from the state, but also to make sure we budget a requirement by the district in order to submit the teachers' names. And at the time we did the amendment, we estimated it to be about 200 teachers. When you submit these names and the criteria for them to participate in the teacher incentive allotment program, there's a fee that has to be paid to the state. So it's $500 per person. So the estimate for that is 100,000 at 200 teachers. And so then this allows the state then to go through, review it. Once they've reviewed it, then I believe the program then takes effect in April in the spring. So we'll know which ones received the recognition. And so with that, then that's when we'll be coming back to the board to budget what it is exactly that this district's going to be receiving in relation to the recognition of the teachers at the 3 different levels.
Any questions? I actually do. So we're estimating we have 200 teachers that can qualify for this recognition.
At the time, the amendment, but I think the number is a little lower, 175? 145.
Okay,
But-
thank you. Anybody else?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr.
So to
Hernandez.
clarify what that program is, how is it operating the district here? That I know because when I was still teaching, we came out with this allotment program. How are they reimbursed like a bonus or grant? The teacher or just the district gets the funds?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. And we actually have our staff here that is administering Eric Costello.
Yes, so the district will receive the funds. 90% of it is designated to the teacher and then 10% will go to the district.
And how does that affect their TRS or is part of their taxes?
That's considered part of their TRS. So that's going to help them in their best years.
The best, okay. All right, thanks. Thanks for explanation. I was wondering how that worked here.
I do have a question. Does a district promote this teacher allotment or incentive?
Yes, we have, and HR has begun promoting that as part of recruitment purposes. Yes.
I have
Thank
a
you.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
What kind of money are we talking about?
So it ranges based on designation. There's 3 levels of designation, and it also ranges based on campus, where that campus is at within a district. So just to give you an estimate of what those ranges are. So for example, Harlandale High School, a teacher who receives the recognized designation of Harlandale High School would be $6,947. And it could go as high up for master level, $25,157. So it varies by campus.
Mr. Soto.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question is that when they ask me about this, I can just refer it to you because there was a teacher that was like gonna
We're gonna
get their
have some stat-
$20,000 and they're leaving and they're asking me, and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I can refer them to you and.
Yes,
they can
please
get
refer
all
them
of their-
because we're gonna
all
have
their
teachers on-
Questions answered somewhere in here.
Definitely.
Yes, Mr.
So
Jones.
just to clarify, the district pays that $500 state fee for our employees, right? Correct?
Yes, sir. We'll pay it and then they turn around and they reimburse us. I think we'll be getting that later on in the fall next year. But we are able to book it as a revenue. But it's a reimbursement by the state.
All right, thanks. Thanks.
sir.
Glad to see that's working here. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Limon.
Trying to figure out how it is. Do they enroll in this incentive? Do you have an enrollment time frame, or is it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year? I'm like, oh my God.
So over the course of a year, teachers meet certain criteria. It's based off of student growth, their T-test evaluation, and depending on grade level, it's also based on student surveys. So once they meet that particular criteria, then that qualifies them for a particular designation.
And this is for high school level, of course, right?
This
High
is
school or for all of them?
for all grade levels. We started last year capturing the student growth information. And we started off with the first cohort, which was specific to reading and math teachers. So they'll be the first group of teachers eligible for this allotment that will pay out in the spring.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. Agenda item 9, Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, ma'am. Just one last item, but that's usually what we get every month is the donations that we have to budget. That's also the budget amendment. Regarding item number 9, it's the board is being presented our annual financial report. We have our outside auditors that are here this evening in order to present that report. This evening, we have Kimberly Lopez and Jason Hyde from the firm of Garza Gonzalez. In your board book, in your electronic board book, if you go to page 60, that's where you'll have the audit summary of what they will be covering. After on page 60 is on page 65 is the management letter. The hard copy was also provided as part of the HH. And if you need to look at the audit report, we also put it as a PDF file on your laptop, and I can certainly walk around and have that pulled up for you. But this evening, the audit summary that Ms. Lopez will be covering is on page 60.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Soto and Dr. Castleberry. I'm Kim Lopez Gonzalez. I'm representing Garza Gonzalez and Associates. And also today is Jason Hyde, who is a manager with the firm and also the manager that worked on this engagement. Thank you for having us this evening. We are here, as Richard said, to present to you the results of the audit for the Harlandale Independent School District for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. As you all are aware, TEA does require that all school districts, Texas school districts, do receive an annual audit that is due to TEA within 150 days of their fiscal year end. Because the district does have a June 30th year end, this report is due by November 27th to TEA to meet that due date. So upon your approval tonight, I believe Mr. Hernandez will be on his way to preparing to present all that information to TA by June 27th. What you have in your board packet is a draft of the annual financial, or actually, I believe that was provided to you in a hard copy, but I do think, Richard, you did mention that it is a PDF. But anyway, it is a draft. So upon approval here by this body, it will then be finalized, and that is the version that will be submitted to TEA. The results of the audit are covered on page 1 of the audit summary. But before I go any further, I do want to thank Richard and his staff for the cooperation. We did have full cooperation throughout the audit. It is a team effort to complete an audit, to perform and complete an audit. We do ask for a lot of information from the district to perform the audit. The management and the district staff does prepare the annual financial report. We do not prepare that, we audit it. And so I'd like to thank Richard and his staff for that cooperation. We weren't restricted in any scope, in our scope. We do determine what we want to test, what we want to look at, and all the information that we requested was provided. So I think that is very positive for you to know, for this body to know that we did have full cooperation throughout the audit. Page 1 of the audit summary, which I believe hopefully that y'all all have it on your laptops before I start. Is it a good time now to go forward with that?
Yes, I believe it's page 61, if I'm not mistaken.
So page 1 of the audit summary, it starts with the summary of the annual financial report. That is this larger report that you have. This, the item 1 on this summary, our first report is the auditor's report on the financial statements. We are rendering an unmodified opinion. That is the same type of opinion that we have rendered in previous years. That is the best type of opinion that an entity can receive. So very positive for the school district. That indicates that all the information that is included in the annual financial report as of June 30th, 2022 is fairly presented in all material respects. And the reason we say fairly presented in all material respects is because we don't audit 100% of your transactions, or we'd never finish the audit by the due date of November 27th. So yes, it is indicating that everything that we've tested in all material is fairly presented in all material respects, and that is an unmodified opinion. Items 2 and 3 included in on page 1. Those are the other 2 reports that we render as a result of the compliance audit that we perform as part of the this whole process. Because the district does administer federal funds that exceed $750,000, we are required to perform what is called a single audit in accordance with the uniform guidance. And along with that, we do test the internal controls and render an opinion in accordance with the government auditing standards. In accordance with both of those opinions, we are indicating that there are no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no non-compliance items required to be reported in the larger report that would then get reported to the grantors, and no question cost. So again, very positive for the school district, indicating that the major programs that we tested, that we found that those funds were being used in accordance with the grant requirements. Item 4 on that same page of the audit summary, as I indicated, we do perform a single audit in accordance with the uniform guidance, and the district does qualify to be a low risk auditee, another positive item for the district, because if you were not a low risk auditee, that indicates that you would be a high risk auditee, I guess you could call it that. I didn't really want to say high risk, but I guess the opposite of low would be high. And so that is more of a negative effect for anybody who is a high risk auditee, because that indicates that in the previous 2 years, you probably had some material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or non-compliance and question costs. So none of that was found in the previous 2 years, and so that is the reason why the district does qualify for a low risk auditee. The major programs that were tested were the ESSER, the Title I, the Special Education, the IDEA program, and also the Emergency Connectivity Fund. Item 4 does give you those programs and also the dollar values of those. As you can see, ESSER 1 is the larger of all of those programs, with a total of $16,850,000 that comprises all those ESSER 1, 2, and 3 programs. And so the total of all those programs, it's not listed here, but it was 26.3 million of all the programs that we tested. The total federal expenditures subject to the single audit was about 41.4 million. So we actually tested more than 20%, although you're a low risk auditee, just because COVID funds are required to be tested as a major program because of the nature of those funds. Moving to page 2 of the audit summary. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them as we go along. But moving to page 2 of the audit summary, the item at the top, item number 5, fund balances for the general fund. The general fund had a fund balance at June 30th, 2022 totaling 53,535,852. And in that table, it breaks it down by the different categories of fund balance, with the top item being the unassigned, indicating that is the amount that has not been restricted, committed, or assigned for any other purpose and can be used for ongoing operations. If you look at the little tick mark item or footnote, item number 1 there, that unassigned amount of 36.5 million represents about 95 days of operation versus 86 days in 2021. And we understand that the board's intent is to maintain about 2.5 months of operation, or about 25 million. So this is that 36.5 million does meet that goal of the board. The fund balance for the general fund did decrease this year by about 9.1 million, but there are reasons for that decrease. If I'm referring to item 5B right now, there was a decrease of 9.1 million. That's actually a net of the expenditures exceeding revenues by 13.2 million. But of that 13.2 million, 11 million was from the use of the maintenance tax notes. So you did have that money that came in last year when you issued those maintenance tax notes. And this year is when you started using them. You used 11 million of that. And that is one of the big reasons why expenditures exceeded revenues. In addition to that, you did have proceeds from the sale of land that came in about 3.4 million. So that is pretty much the net of the expenditures that exceeded the revenues. When you add in those proceeds that came in, that's how you get the decrease of the 9.1 million from the general fund. And what I'm going to do now is pass this on to Jason so that he can continue covering the summary.
I think I'll skip over to the, she just mentioned the right to use lease. There was a new accounting standard that we had to adopt this year, which was the GASB statement number 87, leases. And what that did is, here you had one lease for all of your copiers. And normally what we've done in prior years that was required is you expense it as you pay it. What this new standard did is it put a right to use asset on the statement of net position, which is the government-wide statements, which are not the ones you see every day. This is like your capital assets. And then it also put a liability that was pretty close to that amount. So it didn't have like a huge effect on these financials, but it is a significant change, and there were disclosures and information that was required. So when you see right to use, you'll know what we're talking about. But again, that's not in the information that you get monthly on your financials. You get, your general fund, and that's not going to be in there. I did want to bring up one thing. There is, we did not propose any significant audit adjustments. We had some reclassifications. Staff proposed some adjustments as well based on information from TEA. So again, I would say it's positive. Generally, you can rely on the information that you're provided by your finance department. So most of this information in the financials is not going to be new to you. It's just some of it's presented differently. Going back to page 2 of that summary, I'm just going to highlight some areas that we haven't highlighted yet that I think may be significant, just to highlight on. The general fund budget to actual. And if you wanted to look at that, you would look at page 79 of the big audit report. Your final amended revenues were 149.5 million, and your actual revenues were 139.8. So your revenues came in under by about 9.7 million. Your expenditures were budgeted, the final amended budget were 182 million, and your actual expenditures came in at 153 million. So your expenditures were under budgeted by 29 million. In part C there were 3 functions that did exceed the final amended budget. The general administration, 132,000. The principal payments were 111,000, and your interest was about 16,000. And we note there that most of those overages are related to that adoption of that new GASB. Because it was a new GASB, staff, everyone was trying to figure out how it's going to impact the numbers. And so it just wasn't enough budgeted for in those expenditures, those line items.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So it wasn't projected accurately, but now next year, that's already going to be put in place. So we have a better idea.
Right. So if I can, Jason, and your auditors, you correct me if I'm wrong. But what happened is that on these lease payments, they are budgeted, but not in the what you see those two numbers, 71 and 72. So at the end of this year, this fiscal year that was being audited, rightfully on the GASB 87, we had to reclassify those. To answer your second part of your question, yes, as we get into this year, we've got them classified again to those various functions. We are, and I will be bringing in a budget amendment in order to reclassify them to these two numbers, the 71 and 72. The monies are budgeted. I just got to get them to you in the right classification. Based on the audit, now I know what I need to do on that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So it's more of reclassifying it in the now.
Guided functions.
Yes,
of what the
instead
EA
of what
has.
we used to do before.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I'm so sorry I interrupted.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just
Yes,
one
Mr. Moreno.
question, and it's, I just wanted to clarify, when it comes to the bullet point, due to the decrease in average daily attendance from the impact of COVID-19, that's all generated from it's all from the ADA, the 9.7 million that we didn't have, right?
Are you talking about 6A?
6A,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
So is that like what that equates to? What, 1,100 students, 1,200 students?
Yes, I believe it was.
So in a
about
matter of a
1,000
year,
students.
it's 9.7, almost $10 million by
Right.
missing 1,100 kids. So I don't know if that puts it in scope, how vital attendance is. So I just wanted to clarify that because that's a huge number.
Thank you, Mr. Moreno, for that eye opener. Yes.
Madam Chair, at the same
Yes,
time.
Mr.
So to clarify, we were short of 9.7 million, right? Basically.
Just between the budget and actual.
And so if the expenditures had been more, so we would have been more in the red,
Yes.
because our expenditures actually came in less, right?
Yes, your expenditures came in less in total by 29 million.
So we would have been more debt or more in the red if the expenses would have been higher, right? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luna.
Somebody said.
Mhm. Okay, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, and as she explained earlier, that negative change in fund balance was due to the using those maintenance tax note funds, like for your stadium and for your auditoriums, and that made a huge hit to your fund balance. I was going to highlight some debt items. Your total bond and maintenance tax notes were 219 million. There was a net change. I'm on number 8, by the way. Your total net change in your debt there was about $4.8 million decrease. Some of that's due to the 7.375 bond principal payments that were made. Our audit report also reflects the Series 22 tax refunding bonds for 41.6 million that were used to refund some previous issuances for 41.8 million. Number 9, other long-term liabilities. I just want to highlight something there. This is related to your TRS pension, and as you're aware, we record a pension liability, net pension liability, based on your share of the state's liability. And so your net pension liability at June 30th was 22.9 million this year, and your net pension liability in 2021 was 49.5, and so that's a significant decrease of 26.7. And that's primarily due to the TRS fund, the investment earnings in that fund. Like they had a good year for that year, so it can fluctuate from year to year. So that's why there's a very large decrease in that liability. Same with the OPEB. There's also an OPEB liability for other post-employment benefits. It was 46.6 this year, and it decreased. It was 47.4 last year, so a decrease of 860,000. And I'm guessing it's related to the same thing, investments, earnings at TRS.
I just want to clarify something on these liabilities. The only thing that the district has control over is making payments as required by TRS. So this liability, as Jason indicated, the TRS, state TRS, they have what is called a evaluation study, and they come up with what the liability is, and then each district has to record their proportionate share as provided by that study. So and the district is meeting 100% of their contributions. So that is pretty much all that the district can do related to this, is just make sure that they are paying their contributions.
So the decreases or increases are out of our control. That is totally pertaining to what TRS
Exactly
does with that money that's being invested.
Right, because they have this big, I guess, account or fund rather, and then all the school districts participate in that fund.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Number 10 has to do with property taxes. This audit report does reflect a decrease in your M&O tax rate to 0.9701. It was 0.9976 in the previous year, and you had no change in your INS tax rate. That decrease was offset. The assessed property values in the district did increase by over 10%, and which resulted in the tax levy increasing by 7.5%. So all of those changes, the decrease in the rate and the increases in the valuations and the levy, of course, increased the total property tax revenues reflected by 1.1 million or 3.9%. And you have the information there by fund, how much it increased by each fund. Okay.
So that pretty much summarizes the highlights that we wanted to present to you as a result of the larger report, the annual financial report. And in addition to that, as Richard indicated to you, we also, our firm also does release we call it a management letter, but it is titled the Report on the Conduct of the Audit. This is our communication to you, board members. We are independent, but when we're here performing the audit, we do work very closely with staff, but ultimately we are independent. So our communication to you is in this format, is in the Report on Conduct of the Audit. This is the report where we would indicate to you if we had any difficulties. We're happy to report that we didn't. There are other items that we disclose in there in accordance with our auditing standards. And one of them is to report any internal control matters or other matters that we want to bring to your attention. That is item 3 here under the Report on the Conduct of the Audit, internal control matters. These are not significant or material. As indicated, there were no material or significant items that are reported in the larger report, but we do feel like these 3 needed to be communicated to you. We did communicate them to management. Management did in that report provide their responses on how they They did agree with the comments and they did provide their responses on how they plan to address that going forward to ensure that these comments do not get repeated in the following year. And those three items have to do with vendor disbursement allocations, with monitoring maintenance effort for the Title I and the IDEA programs, and then also related to some internal control matters as part of the student activity funds review that we also do as part of the audit. And this is just a summary of them. The report on the conduct of the audit does have the details spelled out in there. And I know that you all have had the chance or they have been included in your board packet. And if you like, we can go into further detail or even further detail into the items on the annual financial report at this time, if there are any questions related to any of the information that we have covered today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Luna, you had a question? Anybody else? Ms.
Madam
Limon?
Chair, are we going to details in the internal control matters on three, Mr. Hernandez or auditors? On the A, B, and C, on the vendor disbursement allocation, can you clarify each one in detail and what it is? Because I don't know if I have.
Sure, if you have the,
I don't know if I have.
what
that.
page?
This may be on, I'm sorry, it may be on page 72 of your board book, I believe.
To go all the way down, 72. Okay, then if it's in there, then. I'll go ahead and
It'll say
detail it.
it's item in Roman numeral 9, internal control matters.
Yes, and it goes,
Okay.
it's in 2 pages. So yeah, the details are in there. And as I indicated, also the management's responses are included as well.
Okay, great.
But I'll
thank
be
you.
happy to answer any questions.
Okay,
you want.
great. No, this is fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 10. Is that Dr. Hinojosa or who's doing agenda? That's okay. Dr. Salinas, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr.
You're
Salinas.
fine.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Madam.
President, School Board. We have requested an RFP as stated here for our incentives. As you know, we have our safety incentives. And Ms. Jackson has been working with Mr. Mora. The actual RFP, is it P? I think I'm saying that right. Yes, Q? ITB. Okay, invitation to bid, sorry. It closes actually tomorrow, which is why you don't have numbers there yet. But Ms. Jackson is here in case we have any questions. I believe last year we spent approximately $60,000 was the last year's amount for the safety incentive. And so after tomorrow, we'll be able to look through all of the bids and make a determination and have that for you for Monday.
Dr. Salinas, may I ask a question?
Yes.
It says employee safety and attendance incentive items. What is it that as an employee, I need to make sure to do in order to be eligible for this incentive?
Ms. Jackson will speak to that.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
Hi. So in order to qualify for the safety and attendance incentives, an employee would need to not miss more than 5 days, excluding COVID, a COVID diagnosis with medical documentation supporting that, and have no safety events. So have no accident reports, no workman's comp, in order to qualify for the safety and attendance incentive.
And that is for every employee in the district?
Correct.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 11. I'm not gonna guess, who is it?
We have Ms.
Ms. Myrna
Martinez.
Martinez.
Yeah, Ms.
Martinez there.
Martinez for 11 and 12, actually.
Okay,
Yes.
11 and 12, Ms. Martinez.
Yes.
Almost there. So good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Mr. Soto, Dr. Castleberry. The board will be asked to consider and approve the purchase of Sophos MDR, a managed threat protection, detection, and response solution. This item is included in Proposition A of Bond 2022. A managed detection and response solution is a cybersecurity service that combines human intervention with artificial intelligence to perform threat hunting, human and technical monitoring of network traffic, and provide immediate response to threats against our network. The software provides continuous security monitoring while the providers proactively monitor our network, endpoints, and other resources for security incidents. And MDR allows a team of trained individuals to continually check a network for intruders and malware. Included in this purchase is a SIM, or Security Information and Event Management System, that collects event log data and helps identify activity that deviates from the norm and takes appropriate action immediately, even if we're not available. We currently contract with Sophos for their endpoint protection, which serves as our antivirus, anti-malware, and basic web and application filters. Additionally, InterceptX, another Sophos product, provides network drive encryption, and InterceptX Advanced provides security for our servers. The Sophos MDR product incorporates the service with our existing protection solution. Staff recommends that the purchase of Sophos MDR, which is a managed detect and response solution, be purchased from SHI under the PACE Cooperative at a low bid cost of $305,642 for a 5-year contract. Funding will come from the bond 2022 budget's General Facilities Fund.
Any questions to Ms. Martinez on agenda item 11? Okay, I guess not. Moving on to agenda item 12, Ms. Martinez.
Okay. Proposition A of bond 2022 included 4 major technology projects. One of them was to improve and solidify our network and allow us to put things in place that protect against cyber attacks. In order for us to build and maintain a strong security posture and ensure devices are updated and secured, we need to routinely scan the entire network. The products that we're proposing will afford our network staff the ability to scan all network devices on a weekly basis, or more often as we need to or we see fit. A vulnerability scanner allows for a complete overview of the network and can identify weak points in our environment. Without one, it is nearly impossible to ensure that every server and computer that accesses our network is updated with the latest patches and the newest secure baseline. After reviewing several network vulnerability solutions and consulting with multiple vendors, staff selected Tenable Security Center as the best option for our district. Staff asks that you please consider and approve the purchase of a 3-year license with Tenable Security Center, a vulnerability management solution from CDWG, also a PACE Cooperative partner, at an estimated cost of $85,000. Funding will again come from the bond 2022 General Facilities Fund.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Any questions? I do. What do we have in place right now?
Currently, the vulnerability scanner, we partner with NetVision 20 with Region 20. What they provide us as part of the service is a single scan a year. So they'll come in once a year and scan about 20% of our network. And so technically we're missing the other 80% every other day. What this product does is it will allow our staff, again, to scan weekly and even more frequently if we see any potential dangers to our network. We can also, and we have in the past, outsourced and hired someone other times of the year if we felt like there were threats to other school districts or other businesses in and around our area.
So are we going to do the scan on a weekly basis, you said?
Yes, ma'am, that is the
Okay.
plan.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, any other question or comment to Ms. Martinez? Thank you so much, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a question. Because we know that software is always changing and it's always being updated. So on number 11, how long is that contract for?
Number 11 was Sophos. That is a 5-year contract.
5-year contract?
Correct.
And then we have a 3-year contract?
Correct. For the vulnerability.
And so within those 5 years, is there updated information? Will we have an opportunity to get the latest and greatest?
Absolutely.
Or is it you buy the software and that software stays with you for 5 years?
No, ma'am. What this is actually, it's a service. It's a managed service. So it's updated continuously by the vendor that we're hiring. When you look at, one of the items that's on there is, it's monitored by humans, which we don't have the staff to do. If we were a big company or a for-profit business, what they have is what's called a SOC, which is a security operations center. And it's a staff that all they do is monitor their system. So basically that's what we're hiring. So they're actually humans. There's artificial intelligence also involved because the computer can find things much faster than a human. But this is updated daily, probably frequently. It's software that they maintain, not something that we're purchasing and installing on a server in our data center.
Anybody else? Oh, thank you, Ms. Martinez. Moving on to agenda item 13.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Carrillo.
I move to adjourn.
I will second your motion and I will take the vote. Mr. Luna, yay or nay to adjourn tonight's meeting?
Yay.
Ms. Ortiz, yay or nay?
Yay.
Ms. Limon, yay or nay?
Yay.
Ms. Carrillo, yay or nay?
Yay.
Mr. Mancha, yay or nay? And Mr. Moreno, yay or nay?
Yay, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. It is 8:26. Tonight's meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.